Ladies and gentlemen, welcome at last to another Behind the Curtin podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. My name is Jarrod Prugar. I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Murph. It's been a while. We've been traveling all over the place. I was in Texas. You were in Indiana. You got to see Penn State shellac Purdue, much like many teams throughout the country have done. I got to see TCU and Oklahoma State play, and the schedules just really haven't worked out. But what's working out for Penn State right now is their ranking. They are number 4 according to the College Football Playoff Committee. It's where they've been for the last few weeks. They've done really nothing to warrant losing that. They keep winning, and that's what matters the most. Obviously, winning does matter. You wouldn't believe that talking to some of the SEC media people or anybody that's followed Notre Dame and NBC, because they have money in the SEC and Notre Dame. They want what's best for Notre Dame, and what's best for Notre Dame is probably best for them. And as an impartial media correspondent, it's easy to see the bias, right? Because of the money that goes into the ESPN pours into the SEC, that NBC pours into Notre Dame, and even the Big Ten to an extent. But the biggest thing for me is that Notre Dame's schedule is ass. Indiana's schedule was ass. Army's schedule was even bigger ass. And they were undefeated. So when Army gets deplaned or just absolutely ambushed by Notre Dame and they're undefeated and ranked, yeah, of course it's going to look good for Notre Dame. But as you see in the rankings, Army is already out of the top 25, even with one loss. So that's how the committee views Army. But for Penn State, they're number 4. They're ahead of, as I want to say, as you call them, South Bend Community College.
That's absolutely correct.
And they're in the driver's seat for probably the 6th or 7th seed in the college football playoff.
Number 7. So right now they got Notre Dame slotted in the number 7 spot. Number 5 in the AP poll, I believe. And this is the problem that I have with this. Of course, we're all glad that everything's going to 12 teams so that we can get more teams in. Not a problem, right? Wrong. Now, not only do you have in the prior years where you had number 5 and number 6 complaining about they should have been in over the number 4 team, hence Penn State a few years ago when they won the Big Ten and ended up 5th. And didn't make it in because they had 2 losses over Ohio State's 1 loss. But no, they only have 1 loss. Now, you fast forward to now with the 12 teams, and they're using that same psychology and the same schematic to say, well, wait a minute. What about Alabama? They're 8-3. Maybe they should get a shot. What? Are you serious? Like, you guys have lost to 2 unranked teams. 2. And you absolutely got your ass handed to you by Oklahoma. Oklahoma, who is garbage this year. Yeah, they're 6-5, but they're garbage. So, I mean, you look at the rankings and stuff. Here's where I have a problem. You got Boise State, and I'm looking at the teams right now. Other than ASU, Indiana, maybe Miami, I think any of the other teams remaining in that club would beat Boise State. Now, they got a number 4 and a first-round bye. It's not a perfect
That's a
science.
lot of slander for my beloved Boise State Broncos. It's a lot of slander.
I knew you were going to enjoy that. I know you got the helmet now, and you're all happy about that. But,
I did just get some more Boise State gear. I treated myself for my birthday.
God, you're
but
disappointed.
I see your point. Now, the crazy thing about Boise State is, A, they keep winning. Number 1, which isn't the crazy part, but their 1 loss is to the number 1 team in the country, which is Oregon. Now, they weren't number 1 at the time, but it's a close loss to Oregon. And if Boise State is undefeated right now, if they do beat Oregon, this is a completely different conversation. But the Mountain West is not the power of conferences, but it also speaks to the volumes of how just absolutely terrible the Big 12 is. The Big 12 has 9 teams that could end up being in the Big 12 championship game this week. So,
yes.
and Miami is a couple games away from not even sniffing the college football playoff. And you've got upstart SMU, who just joined the ACC this year that is now leading the way.
I mean, yeah. There's some new blood in there. There's some new blood. You got your old hats with Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State, Notre Dame. Texas is relatively new the last few years to the conversation. Miami's an old blood that's coming back in. Notre Dame's always sniffing around, but they can't seem to get in there because they are intent on playing Air Force, Navy, and Army every single year. So when you look at some of the new blood, and obviously, I do got to give a shout out to this because I've been taking some criticism from my good friend Jennifer here in the Valley. Big ASU lover, season tickets in the past and stuff. And she did text me the other night after the game when ASU won. So ASU has a shot. I mean, if they win this week against Arizona, which is most likely going to happen, it is a rivalry game. ASU is going to be in the Big 12 championship game. So, what I was really hoping for was Penn State maybe to get down to that 5 spot, 6 spot, and have ASU bounce in there and come to Happy Valley, because I'd never hear the end of that back here. But the matchups are intriguing. I honestly think the path for Penn State, if it stays where it is, and that is home against Indiana. If they get past that game, they would play Miami. Totally doable, I think, from what we've seen from Miami this year. Miami hasn't played a defense like Penn State's. So Penn State could find them in a very, very best path forward to get into the semifinal. If you would look at it today, and I know this is probably all going to change come next week and the week after with the Bowl Championship, you're probably looking at Ohio State, Georgia, possibly Penn State, and a Texas or a South Bend Community College Final Four. But that's something I want to touch on later, Jarrod, is, if you've noticed, you've been around X and perusing the boards and perusing the comments and stuff, the feeling is they're like, all right, let's go Michigan. Let's go Michigan. Let's beat Ohio State. If they beat Ohio State, Penn State wins. Guess what? Penn State's going to the Big Ten championship game. So then what happens if Penn State makes it to the Big Championship game and they lose? Now you got 2 losses. So
2 losses, but you're in a conference championship. I'm very intrigued to see how they look at that.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
exactly.
Because are you going to reward a team for making it to the college or to a conference championship game only to lose?
I agree.
Like, I agree with you. And now, speaking of Penn State, okay, so that gives Penn State 2 losses. But let's look at Georgia. Georgia would have 3. 2 of those regular season, 1 a conference championship. Do these postseason does that not count towards the record? Is it?
I don't think it should.
Right, because you can't punish a team.
I don't think it should be penalized exactly for playing that extra game.
You can't punish a team, number one, for Penn State. Let's say Penn State doesn't make it. You can't punish them for not making it.
Right. And what if Ohio State? If Ohio State
you can't punish Ohio State.
Now they have 2 losses. Penn State has 1. So people are going to be like, vote for Oregon. I love it. I love this banner. I'm fired up tonight, buddy.
I love it too, and I've said this. I've said this so many times over the past few days because people that I work with at school know that I love college football, and they know that I love sports in general. But man, this college football, this edition of college football is just absolutely awesome. Every game matters. Last week, 20 games mattered. I'm not sure that that's ever happened.
No.
There's just so much that can go on. Like, obviously, it's tough for Penn State fans to root against Michigan or root against Penn or Ohio State. Not easy or hard, whatever. But to root for Michigan is difficult. To root for Ohio State is also difficult. But also, at the same time, Penn State's in a great position. Their 1 loss is to Ohio State.
That's 7 points.
Ohio State is going to be playing either against Oregon in the conference championship game, or that's going to be Penn State. Then, to me, Penn State and Ohio State end up flipping. Where Penn State gets that 5 seed, Ohio State gets that 6 seed, and Notre Dame, who doesn't play in a conference, gets the 7 seed. And I think that would be perfectly fair. Now, at the same time, if Georgia goes in and beats Texas, that I think they flip-flop in the rankings. And Texas goes to 8, where I think Georgia.
Where's Georgia right now?
Georgia
is seventh. Seventh right
Georgia
now.
is 7th.
Okay, so do
But
you think
they would be the 8th seed? They would be the 8th seed because Penn State goes to 5 when the Big 12 when the seeds go. So Oregon, let's assume Oregon is Big 10 champion. Then it's going to be Texas. Then it's going to be, I think, SMU, or the ACC champion, if you will. Then it's going to be Boise State is the top 4 seeds. They all get buys, which is unfortunate because I want to see a team like Tennessee or Georgia go to Boise,
North.
Idaho.
Absolutely.
I would love that. That
Absolutely.
would be incredible. But if that doesn't happen, it's not going to happen because Big 12 is butt cheeks. Put that on record, whatever. I think they are butt cheeks. I've seen it in person. I know it to be true. So then that makes Penn State at this point or honestly, Ohio State's going to be the 5 seed, or whoever loses the Big 10 championship game. That bumps Penn State to 6. That bumps Notre Dame to 7. And I think the loser of the ACC championship game ends up being 9th. And the loser of the SEC championship game ends up being 8th.
And you bring up a good point, Jarrod. You still have 2 more weeks of shuffling. And
yes.
And like right now, we can sit here and look at this right now. And I look and I say, I want ASU to come north. I want to see what that's all about. I got my ear to the ground here in the Valley with ASU. And of course, you all know what happened last week. If you saw the end of that game with ASU and BYU. And now people are, I get it. You were 3-9 last year. They feel like Pitt football. Pitt football 3-9, and then next week 7-0, and that's we're going to end up 7-5. But ASU is like, hey, what about us? Yeah, I mean, you went from 3-9 to where you're at right now. It's a great jump. But I want to see how these teams play. I want to see them come. I did see some stuff yesterday on the Sun Devil page on Facebook, and people are like, we go up there, and I'm like, I don't really think you guys know what you're in for when you go to the Horseshoe or you go to Beaver Stadium to play towards the end of December.
100%.
And the funniest comment, I just got to throw this out there, Jarrod, before you go to a break. But the funniest comment I saw was, people don't realize it gets cold here in the desert too this time of the year.
It's a different cold.
Really? Like, yeah, it gets
it's like a different. It's the same thing. It's a different heat, right? It's a different heat. It's a different cold too.
It's a different cold. It's a dry cold.
right, dry freeze. Now, before we go into break, I want to talk about some of the matchups, right? And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about these in the third segment. But because we're talking about it, you've got Georgia Tech and Georgia. Georgia Tech has that upset win over Miami. They are a 7-4 team. They can get to 8 wins with a win against Georgia. That effectively eliminates Georgia, I think, from the top 12.
I agree
if that were to happen. Ole Miss has Mississippi State. Ole Miss is one of those teams that is just out of it, right? They play on Friday. Colorado's got Oklahoma State. I think it was all the LOL that they lost the way that they did to Kansas. They got shellacked or buffaloed, if you will. You've got Tennessee at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has been the spoiler in the SEC. Still 6-5. So that means that it's not a great win. Looking at you, Alabama. You got South Carolina and Clemson essentially for a battle to make the playoff, I think. Because
especially if Georgia loses for South Carolina. Yes, I agree with that.
And same thing with Clemson. With all of those SEC teams losing, that really opens the door for a third ACC team. I think the two teams that play in the conference championship, that's going to be Miami most likely and SMU, barring anything unforeseen for Clemson, or anything really, I guess, for Miami. So, I mean, that is something. Notre Dame has to travel to USC. USC is down this year. They're 6-5, but that's a rivalry game. You're fighting for your season, and Lincoln Riley's fighting not necessarily for his job, but for next year to see who he's going to bring back and what quarterback he's going to run into the ground next. Miami's got to go to Q's and play in the dome, in the Carrier Dome. I don't know that it's called the Carrier Dome anymore, but it's always going to be the Carrier Dome to me. That's not an easy place to play. Syracuse is a quiet 8-3. Kyle McCord in the Orange are doing some really good things up there.
They're 8-3, and to add to that, and they absolutely crapped the bed against Pitt of all teams. Like, they were just McCord threw 3 pick sixes in that game in the first half.
Yes, he played it terribly. Cal's got SMU, Auburn and Alabama in the Iron Bowl. Arizona State's got Arizona.
Texas.
Purdue is at Indiana. I don't think that's going to be a problem.
No,
but
Purdue.
You're going to see what Indiana is made of, because you're coming off of a lopsided loss at Ohio State. This is a trap game to me, because what are you trying to play for, right? Like, you need to win this game to stay in the playoff.
Oh, that's exactly it. This is a playoff game for Indiana.
Yeah.
So I think they'll be focused. Purdue's awful. I saw it with my own eyes with the game.
Yes, they absolutely are. Then you've got Washington and Oregon. I don't think that's going to be a hard one. If Oregon loses to Washington, that opens up Pandora's box for a lot of different situations. You've got Texas A&M and Texas. Texas A&M was focused on Texas against Auburn, and you could tell. Like, they wanted Texas. If Texas A&M wins, that's big.
It's chaos. Chaos again.
It is, and that's exactly what's so great about this. Kansas State's got Iowa State in the Big 12. There are 1.5 million different scenarios in the Big 12. BYU is clinging to the top 25 after being in, I think, the top 10. So there's just so much that can go on right now, and this is around the country. If Penn State handles business, which we're going to talk about business against Maryland here when we come back from this break, then they are in the perfect position to pounce wherever that might be. We're talking about the Terps or the Twerps or whatever you want to call them when we come back from this break on the Behind the Curtin podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to Behind the Curtin podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. My name is Jarrod Prugar, and this is Murph on the other side of this. Penn State does have a game this week. They got to beat Maryland. The Terrapins. It's a rivalry that's one-sided for the most part, especially recently. 2020 was a big but that was most of it. I don't think this is going to be a game that Penn State's going to be close, but I do think that they need it to be a blowout. I think they need some style points. Although, I will say this. Style points didn't help Notre Dame against the beloved Army. So I think the value of the win far supersedes the value of a blowout this late in the season. But Penn State's number 4. They won a close one against Minnesota in Minnesota, and they didn't fall anywhere while beloved South Bend Community College ends up thumping Army. And here we are.
So, and so you're right about the Maryland game. And every year it seems like Maryland is being talked about. And every year they underachieve every year. You look back at this, the 43-3-1 or something like that is the record. And 2 of those wins are since 2014, one in the COVID era, one a 1-point win by Maryland back in 2014. But you go back to like the last 10 games or so, and you got scores like 47-7, 70-7, 66-3, 38-3, 59-0, 30-0, 51-15. Penn State's not just beating Maryland; they're absolutely drubbing them. And I really don't expect that to be a problem this week. Obviously, you can't take anybody lightly. Again, for Penn State, just like Indiana, this is sort of like a playoff game for them, because if you lose and you're Penn State, with all the pressure that we've been seeing in the last week or two from the media about pushing the SEC and not pushing Notre Dame, You could find yourself on the outside looking in. Um, right or wrong, that's just the bias that we're starting to see now with this push. I think Penn State goes in and handles business this week. Uh, Now you look back to the Minnesota game, um, and Jarrod, and I've even brought this up to people that I was talking to because I'm getting texts during the game, like, hey man, what's going on? And I'm like, Jarrod, we talked about this in the last month. Even when I do my write up about the 10 things, I think, even mentioning it on this podcast, that's the game I was fearing the most the last month of the season because Penn State always goes there. PJ Fleck has his guys ready to play, and PJ Fleck does a hell of a job getting his team ready. And
100%.
I mean, you look at that game and you see the difference in the coaching between the first half and the second half. I thought the first half was coaching scary, not going for it on 4th and inches, or 4th and inches and not using your 240-pound quarterback or your 260-pound tight end on a tush push. Why? This is the same thing that got him into trouble against Ohio State. Like, you're going to line the guy back up 4 yards off the ball when you need 9 inches. Like, why? I don't understand that. Anyway, to Penn State's credit, we all know some huge carrying the cojones in a wheelbarrow with James Franklin and his staff in that fourth quarter. 3 converted 4th downs, the fake punt, obviously, that everybody's been raving about. And honestly, if you're Minnesota, how are you not ready for that? Like, that was my big question. Great call. You should have been expecting that. But Franklin has really not shown anybody that he's willing to do crazy stuff like that. So anyway, it kind of goes both ways. I just kind of wanted to touch a little bit, on the review from the Minnesota game and things that we saw. Again, the defense, Jarrod, I've been saying this all year. I think the defense is very good. I don't think they're great. And the reason I
Mhm.
don't think they're great is they miss entirely too many tackles. It is have been a problem all year, and they're diving at people's shoelaces. And I don't understand it. I've been watching it. At this point in the season, you're not going to change it. It's not going to all automatically just rectify itself. That's just a concern for me going forward.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I mean, Minnesota's tough. PJ Fleck always has his team, and I think a lot of people around Penn State. I think and especially me, I kind of forgot that they were coming off of a bye. And PJ Fleck reminds me a lot of James Franklin. There are a lot of similarities there. I was fortunate enough a couple of years ago, prior to COVID, to see PJ Fleck speak at a Nike Coaches Clinic, and he is intense. Like, he's an intense dude. The way that he goes about his business, the way that he does things, why he does things, I think is incredible. So I mean, they and his teams, as ridiculous as you think those cheesy slogans are, they buy in. And it's the same thing for Penn State and James Franklin. That want to know mentality, that unrivaled mentality, right? That's the way that you do have to view things, I think. And it's worked out for Penn State far more than it hasn't. And I think that is a tribute to what Franklin has been able to do. But you're absolutely right, man. He nutted up, and he was a great coach late in that game. And that's not something that people tend to say about James Franklin because
Mhm.
of what you saw in the first half. If James Franklin did what he did in the fourth quarter, if he did what he did in the fourth quarter and he did that all 4 quarters of every game, everybody's outlook and vision of James Franklin will be different. Do I think that that's sustainable? No, probably not. But the way that he coached and what he did, the stuff you saw on the sidelines with Drew Aller, I thought was absolutely phenomenal. He wasn't too high, he wasn't too low. He was even keel, and he dialed Drew Aller back in, and that was what was necessary.
Sure.
Because what we're seeing is Drew is an emotional leader, and there's good about that, and there's not necessarily a little bit bad, but maybe misguided. Because when you let too much emotion impact you, the frustrations on the field and that sort of thing, then
Mhm.
that's something serious. Um,
Mhm. I mean,
but
nobody's comparing him to George Pickens. I can tell you that.
right. But the big thing is Franklin said what he needed to say. They got that part done. They went out, called that fake punt, and it was beautifully executed. Went for it again on fourth down. And then Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren, to me, is a guy that needs to go to New York, not to shop, not to see the ball drop, not to see the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center. That dude needs to be in a tuxedo at the Heisman ceremony. Do I think that he should win? I don't know that that's the case, but you can't tell me that there's another player in the country that matters that much to his team that Tyler Warren does. Travis Hunter, sure, he plays both ways, but that offense also has Shedeur Sanders. And that defense is not good. It's the Big 12. So, I mean, you can say what you want about Travis Hunter, and what he does is impressive. Same thing with Ashton Jeanty, and I think Tyler Warren and Ashton Jeanty are a lot closer than people think. Like I joke, I love Boise State. Boise State's my favorite team for reasons that aren't irony. I like Kellen Moore growing up. I thought that was fun. They were fun to watch, and they were just different. And now it's one of the few teams I get to actually see play regularly. But the way that they impact their teams on offense are unlike anything else around the country. And that needs to be valued as well. Warren falling down rather than going to score and going up 8 points, just ending the game and doing what he was told, was probably the most impressive play of that game outside of, the fake punt.
You saw something a couple years ago, if you remember Nick Singleton's freshman year, when he didn't go down at the 1 yard line, and he cost them the game. They come back inside the game. So yeah, you touched on a few things there, Jarrod, that I wanted to expand on. And the first one is the last point you brought up about having that, knowing your situation of football. Tyler Warren catches that ball. They're out of timeouts. Game's over. He scores. They still have a chance. Anything can happen. I mean, you saw the Redskins and the Cowboys game the other day with only 30 seconds from their own 13-yard line. So anything can happen. So that was great. I love that, hopefully that was addressed in the huddle prior to whatever. I love that part. The second point I want to touch on is the fact that I also believe that Tyler Warren should be invited to New York City. The stuff that he brings to the team, the things he does. I mean, you got Singleton, you got Allen, you got Drew Aller. Warren, though, has been the glue that has kept this offense together all season long. And it's not just catching the ball. It's making the block. It's playing quarterback, playing running back, playing wide receiver, snapping the ball. Like, he's a utility man, but he's also doing it on a Big Ten top 4 team that's going to be in the playoffs, and that's saying something. Yes, Gianti is he's phenomenal. He is that offense. Teams are gearing up to stop him, and they can't do it. At that, I believe he deserves the Heisman Trophy over Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter has
You've redeemed yourself from your Boise State slander, but continue.
And then the other thing you mentioned is Drew Aller this year. And we've seen this from the get-go, from the West Virginia game at the beginning of the season. He had that little chip on his shoulder. We're like, wow, Drew Aller is going up. Drew Aller is taking command. So it was kind of funny. I don't know if you saw my Facebook post, but my cousin, and she probably won't listen to this podcast, so I don't have to worry about any pushback on this. But she commented about the quarterback throwing a hissy fit on the sideline and acting like a big baby. And I followed that up with, she goes, I don't really pay attention to football, but I've always been told I have to root for Penn State in this house. And it was kind of funny. She didn't really mean any ill will towards it. And I responded to that. And I said, if you know where he was last year to where he is this year, I said, I would love, and his teammates feed off of that. So he's stepping up. He's taking responsibility. He was jacked because they ran that fake punt. He was trying to get a timeout. He was mad that they didn't get the play call in time. He felt they could get it based on, from what I saw, I think he felt they could get the first down based on the formation that Minnesota set up with. Instead, you have Tyler Warren adding to his arsenal as a punter now, even though it wasn't very good. But I love that fire from Drew. You hit the nail on the head. James Franklin talked to him on the sideline. Drew got mad, went to the bench. Franklin went right over very calmly. Like you said, he dialed him back in. He brought him in. Drew understood. He knew the assignment. And he went out and performed flawlessly after that. Some guys go in the tank when they do that. He did not. So I likened it to a Tom Brady moment. You've seen Tom Brady have blow-ups on the sideline, and he goes out. It doesn't affect him. I like that part. So I wholeheartedly agree on all three items that you brought up, though.
Wow, that's crazy. But no, and I think that's the biggest thing. You look at the body of work, and it's just impressive to me because Aller is a guy that you could say that he could leave this year to go pro, and I think people would be, you know what, that probably makes sense. But I do think that he's going to come back and run it back because, hey, at this point, the way the NIL is, he can make guaranteed money in college, and that sets him up to have a bigger year in the pros. But James Franklin's coaching and leadership showed. Listen, everybody gives him crap for the way that he coaches sometimes, and understandably so, because there are games that he has outcoached himself. And I think a lot of times that it happens. Like you look at as a microcosm, you look at Ohio State games in a vacuum, right? There's that timidness. There's not necessarily aggressiveness.
Playing not to
You're
lose.
right. Instead of playing to win, and to quote Jim Mora, Danny Green, you play to win the game, right? And if you play to win, like they did against Minnesota, again, the notion that James Franklin can't coach on game day goes out the window. I'd rather him be aggressive, patiently aggressive, if you will, than be that patiently timid, so to speak. And if he's able to do that, like people love James Franklin. You either love him or you hate him. He is a polarizing figure. But there have been more players that have gone through Penn State that love him rather than hate him. The ones that typically hate him, that have the axe to grind, are there's a reason they have that. And it usually hasn't worked out for them. But again, he coached them up. His leadership showed. So did Drew Allers. And Luke Reynolds, man, he executed. Everybody executed on a play. And that's the biggest thing. 9 times out of 10, it's not the coaching, it's not the play call, it's the execution of it that determines whether something succeeds or does not.
So, agree.
I like the fact that you're agreeing. I don't always get that a lot as a married guy. So we're gonna end the second segment on a good note on the Behind the Curtain podcast on the Sports Now Network. We'll catch you after this break. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Behind the Curtain podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. He's Murph. I'm Jarrod. Let's go around the country. We previewed Maryland a little bit. I don't think it warrants anything more than what we've already talked about, just because of the nature of the game and the nature of Maryland's team under Mike Locksley. Around the country, Michigan, Ohio State. That's the game that everybody at Beaver Stadium is going to be tuned in for. I would imagine you're going to let fans in early. That game is going to be on the video board. Who do you got?
I got Ohio State 38-13. I think that Ohio State, after watching what they did at the end of the game last week against Indiana, if they get the opportunity to do the same thing here, that game might be 45-13 at the end. I got Ohio State going away. Michigan's just not good this year.
I agree. I think Ohio State is, but I'm very curious because Michigan has played well at times and they haven't played well at times. If the snake-bitten James Franklin that we see against Ohio State is going to be Ryan Day against Michigan because of recent history, I'm very curious to see that. And I do think that Ohio State wins. I think it's going to end up being closer. It's a rivalry game. It's the game of the week. And we're going to get to see big noon kickoff statistics. Oh, biggest game of the year. No shit. Like, we know. We know it's the biggest game of the year because it is the biggest game of the year. Like,
Well, you got
everybody
the
tunes in
world
at noon.
famous Buckeyes, Jarrod. You forgot about it. The
I'm
world
so glad that
famous.
9 times out of 10 I don't have to listen to many of these broadcasters because sometimes they can be infuriating. Maserati Marv for the 65th time in a row. Texas A&M.
So we got Archie Manning coming in this week for Quinn Ewers. Archie Manning has shown that he's capable. I as much as I think this will be close, I think that Texas actually hangs on to this win. I'm going to go Texas 27-20 in this one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be closer because obviously Texas A&M didn't give a crap about playing at Jordan-Hare, and it cost them big time. So I do think that's going to be. I do think Texas is going to win that one. What better problem? What great problem to have? You go from Quinn Ewers to Arch Manning. Really
right.
tough for quarterback depth. Tennessee Vanderbilt. We'll round it out with this.
I think this is another one, Jarrod. Honestly, on paper, you're going to come right out and say Tennessee. Vanderbilt has beat Alabama. They have beat the other upset win they had. It escapes me right now. Vanderbilt is capable. Vanderbilt is capable. They've shown that. Tennessee has a lot to play for. This is kind of a playoff game for Tennessee as well. I think this is going to be
it's
another
a playoff game for Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I think this is a game that I think also is going to go down to the fourth quarter. I'm going to say Tennessee. I'm going to go Tennessee 38, Vanderbilt 30.
I want chaos. I'm taking Vanderbilt 20-17. I have seen the best of Tennessee. I've seen the worst of Tennessee, and I don't know what's going to happen here. But this is a wild time. We might be seeing some goalposts go down Broadway yet again.
Sure.
Also, kudos to Alabama for earning $300,000 for field storms. 2 against Oklahoma because of the game ending, and then 1 against Vanderbilt. So, I mean, that's great. I think that's absolutely top notch. Just like they needed any more money. But we got a curtain call. Oh, wait. It's been a while. Penn State score.
Penn State. I'm going to say Penn State. I don't think it's going to be as bad. It's not going to be close. But I think once we get into the third quarter of this game and Penn State kind of puts Maryland in the rearview mirror, we saw what happened last week with season-ending injuries to Alonzo Ford and Donka, both who have been playing extremely well. I think Penn State's going to look to get a lot of guys into this game, try to keep everybody healthy. I'm going to say Penn State 31, Maryland 10.
Yeah, I think the defense does their job. I think the Penn State defense has been underrated this year, which is weird to say because I think they've played very, very well. But again, I mean, my biggest thing for them is just keep doing what you're doing. Keep winning. Keep playing to win. I need to see Penn State score 42 points. 42 points. I think it's going to be 42-10. I need them to put some points up, go into the playoff with some momentum, play it with Drew Aller trending upwards, with Nicholas Singleton trending upwards, Katron Allen getting trending upwards, and I want to see them get Tyler Warren to his 1,000 yards for the season.
Good point. Very good point.
And then hope that Tyler Warren goes to New York City, and then you get those 2 weeks off here with conference championship, and a week at an Army Navy game, and then December 20th or 21st, you're hosting a game at Beaver Stadium, or potentially, playing in a New Year's Six game.
So,
curtain call. Some of us have birthdays coming up. Some of us are very clearly older than others. If you couldn't tell why I wear a hat, it's because you don't need to see what's the top of my head. That's why he's sitting back. If you're watching this on YouTube, the glare was blinding. That's why I have glasses on. I'm surprised they didn't turn into transition lenses. But I do want to wish my co-host the happiest of birthdays on Wednesday, November 27th. It's very clear that his parents were busy in February of whatever year he was born. Love was in the air. They created an intrinsic creature known as Murph that has been known to view youth games across the street on top of cars, talk crap about Pitt, South Bend Community College, anybody, any team, anywhere outside of Penn State, or the Boston Celtics or the Cleveland Browns, who miraculously pulled one out in the snow.
Wasn't that great?
The Steelers. And of course, of all people, my Dallas Cowboys have beat both the Browns and the Steelers. So if you're looking for supremacy, get in line. But I do wish the happiest of birthdays to him. It's been a pleasure having him on the podcast and doing this podcast with him. I know it doesn't always happen regularly, but it does happen. We are the two busiest guys, I feel, in the world. And eventually we will figure out a set schedule. But what's the use when magic happens every time that we hit the mic?
I appreciate that, Jarrod. It's always a fun time. I really enjoy doing this, and it's just fun to come on and talk football and sometimes other items. And it's funny because I do have people reaching out saying, hey, send me your podcast whenever you get a chance, or copy that, and I do that, and it makes me feel good. I don't need 5,000 people to listen to it. It's just cool that some people actually, do listen to it. So yes, I appreciate the birthday kudos. I know you got one coming up next year, and you're a little bit more than half my age now, so that makes me feel a little bit better. As you're the same age as my son, as you guys went to elementary, junior high, and high school together. But in this time, curtain call, we like to take shots. We like to, I had plans of coming in here and taking shots at the NIL program. I had plans of taking shots at Kenny Dillingham for his conduct at ASU with the officials after the game. Totally shocked that he didn't get fined a 15-yard penalty or ejected from the game with that charade. It is what it is. He's a very emotional guy. But instead, I want to take this another route. This is Thanksgiving week. And I just, we all have things to be thankful for. I'm thankful to be able to have the opportunity to be able to do something like this. It's fun for us. We don't make money off of it. It's just something that's nice to do. But, it is also a time to reflect on what we have versus what we don't have. And I've always been that type of person as of late. As we get older, we recognize that things aren't as important as other things, and that, hey, we may be struggling, or we may not have everything we need, but you know what? We have jobs, we have food, we have a house, we have friends, and, we have the ability to be able to do stuff like this from clear across the country, and hook up on a weekly basis with this. So just this Thanksgiving, I just want to say, I'm very thankful for everything. I've got a great family. I've got a great fiance. I've got great friends. I've got a great job. So I just have a lot to be thankful for, and I would hope that a lot of our listeners out there would feel the same.
I am disappointed that you left out the most important thing to be thankful for, your co-host, but it's cool. I get it.
I said I'm thankful for the opportunity for you and I to do this together. There's no other.
That's fair. I'll allow it this time because you're the birthday boy. It's cool. Next week I make the rules. But anyway, for Murph and Jarrod, we wish you the happiest of Thanksgivings, and we will talk to you again, hopefully after Saturday's game, sometime before next year. For Murph, this has been Jarrod on the Sports Now Network. Thank you as always for listening.